I've got a 2x2 and I want to make something that doesn't look like it came from a 2x2. Let's get started. I started by cutting it to length. I'm making 4 legs for a potted plant holder that I've been wanting to make for a while. For any legs, everything if it's possible, I always cut a fresh end on my wood to avoid any cracks or unevenness. For any repeated cuts, I'm always glad to have my stop block. It took about an hour to set up and I'm using it for almost all my projects. Definitely a worthwhile thing to make. I cut a final piece at around 14 inches to make two 5.5 inch parts. But as you'll see, I need the grip for safety and I'll cut it to length later. Once I get to my potted plant, I realized that 2x2s are a bit wide for the look I'm going for, so I ripped all my parts to 1 inch on the table saw. The easier way to do this would have been to rip it before, obviously, but this works, so here we go. On all 4 legs, I do my markings at 3.5 inches on one side, then 1.5 inch lower. If you want full written instructions with diagrams, check out mattbuilds.com. I've got planned for almost all my original builds. Thanks for checking it out. And while you're at it, please like this video and subscribe for more build videos every week. I marked the bottoms and tops at 5/8 of an inch, measured on the opposite side of the last measures. Finally, I joined the first lines with the second ones I did, which forms a nice tapered leg for my plant stand. To cut this, there's many ways, but I'm using the bandsaw. Cut them as close as you can. Sanding will hide any rough spots. You might remember this saw from an earlier video. I bought it to use outside for my renovations, but I found it a second use to make dowels. I trace where I want the parts to cross, and using a second wooden fence on my saw and the sliding mechanism of the miter saw, I can cut dowels moving the piece sideways from cut to cut. I get right up to the mark, then usually I need one more cut to be able to slide it in. Now back on my shop's miter saw, I could have just used the other one, but this one is nice and sharp and precise. I cut my pieces to 5.25 inches, just a bit wider than my pot. I put them together with glue, and this is where I realized I didn't cut deep enough. I tried taking it out off camera, but it's snug in there, so I just hammered it in and went to the belt sander. Next time I'll add an 8 to my dowels and avoid this situation. Now for the actual sanding, I made it all nice and smooth, gave the edges a slight chamfer with the sander. I don't have a special technique to assemble this, but the Gorilla wood glue I'm using is nice and tacky, so it wasn't too complicated to keep it together. But add glue on the square inner edges of the legs and center the cross with clamps. I plan to hide the screws, so with a 3/8 inch bit, I drilled the 4 connections about a 1/4 inch deep, then finished the hole with a bit that's the size of my 2.5 inch wood screws. To hide the screws, I'm using dowels that I cut myself from a longer one on the bandsaw. I glue and hammer the dowels in, and off camera I sanded them flush with the oscillating sander. I wanted to make sure this was solid and those 4 screws wasn't enough for my taste. So I improvised some pocket hole like screws angled from the bottom. I used clamps to hold it together so it doesn't spread apart when screwing. I used the same 2.5 inch screws. Those won't be seen as it's the underside. I painted the whole thing with the same seemingly infinite gallon of paint I've been using for the past few months. For protection and its gloss effect, I give it 2 coats of wipe-on polyurethane. That's it. From a 2x2 about an hour ago, I've got a nice pot stand that I can sell on the marketplace, keep or give away. Thanks for watching and see you next time.